Welcome again to The Discarded Compass, and I'm going to get straight into our guest. It's Mandi Solk, and Mandi has a website, by the way, healingbyrevealingsoul.com. We never know what's next with Mandi because she's a very colourful person. Let's get into the interview. Mandi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, and I've been looking forward to this. I remember you had quite a profound awakening, and your book is fairly powerful as well, I was told. Where?
Who told you?
someone that obviously got it. Obviously got the message.
I've got in here, the joy of no self.
That's
and
the
one
one.
Of the pages is blank, and it just says, "Enjoy this page."
That's the message, isn't it? And you had a moment when you were younger. You had an awakening of sorts. What happened then?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's been quite a few. I think the one that's in my book, the one the biggest one, was when I was 18 and I was riding a motorbike. Well, it wasn't really a motorbike. It was more of a moped, actually. You wouldn't have thought you could have accidents really on one. Anyway, I was going down a road and a lady was coming out with her car and just not looking. And I just realised there was going to be a big collision. And I just saw that I was going to die. And I thought, oh, I'm going to die now. And it was just, and then this sort of inner voice just said, let go of the handlebars, which is completely counterintuitive. Usually you want to hold on like anything. But I just obeyed that voice and just let go. And what happened that people saw was, and I was little and thin, not like now. So you probably can't imagine this now, but I was very petite then. And there was a really a massive impact and crash between this moped, actually, and the mini car. And apparently I went through the back of the windscreen of the Mini and out through the other side. And the Mini car was a complete write-off, and so was the moped, just completely beyond repair. And I was lying dead on the street. So that's what people saw. For me, what happened was that at that point of impact, I wasn't aware of any impact. I just was aware of being sort of lifted, if you like, up and up and up and up. And it was as I went higher, it just became happier, you know. And I was looking down and I could see the shops and the people and everything. And I suddenly realised that I could see through them. They were completely transparent. And I started laughing my head off and thinking, oh my goodness, this is all a dream. There's absolutely no reality to it. Everything's just made of light, you know. But with the physical senses, you see it as something dense. But with, anyway, these senses, it looked light. So it went up and up. And there were things that looked like trees, but they weren't trees, looked like brown pillars with a green light. So it felt like I was in a woods, but I wasn't. And I didn't see any people, and there weren't any tunnels, and there was nobody familiar. It was just a feeling of intense love, as if I was at a 10-star hotel and my wish is their command. You know, it just felt like the ultimate in hospitality. That's how I put it. And I saw these columns that looked like trees, and they all had sort of open sesame kind of shaped doors in them. And I just knew that behind each door there was something absolutely wonderful. And I just couldn't wait to go through one. And I was just about to go through one when I woke up on the road, and you know, they'd drawn a chalk line. Apparently I was clinically dead, you know. And then I woke up. But the thing was, I didn't even have a bruise on me. I didn't have whiplash. I didn't have a cut. I didn't have a bruise, nothing. And yet the bike and the car were a complete write-off. And all I did have a feeling was just a silly smile on my face and just the kind of feeling that everything is just so okay, you know. And any fear of death just went then. That was, you know, there was no fear of death. And I suppose, you know, and that has, because it's been in the background. I mean, that happened when I'm pretty old now, you know, because like I'm 67 now, and I was about 18 when that happened. So it did shape my life, because you can't forget something like that. And you know, you just can't take things quite so seriously when you've sort of been through something like that, and you realize that as long as that you are present to whatever's happening, it's always dealable with, and that you get the right ideas at the right time. But when you're stuck in present or future, ideas can't come through, you know. Any ideas that are really good don't come from you, you see. They come from beyond that, your essence, which is the infinite essence. So that was the big one.
That
I've written about that in that little book.
And that's in your book, is it?
Yeah. I mean, I wrote that book donkeys years ago in about 2006. I'm trying to write a couple of other ones now, all at the same time. But that one's called The Joy of No Self, and and really, I mean, you know, I just kind of I don't do anything. I'm not in any way remarkable. I'm not one of these remarkable teachers, and I'm not a teacher. You know, I just kind of live life as it's happening, really. So, you know, I mean, it's sort of so it's a pretty happy way to live, because there's no description about, well, this is good and this is bad, or this is, you know, fearful, or that's not fearful, or it's just there's less and less. There's just not much description, really. Not much narrative. I mean, I think everybody's the same. I think the only difference between sages and non-sages, and I'm certainly not a sage, maybe an onion. No, sorry. I mean, is that everybody hears thoughts, but most people are interested in them and addicted to them and totally curious about their thoughts. And well, I can only speak for me, and I'm not interested. I'm not interested in what the thoughts have to say, you know, unless I'm planning to do something. So I'm not led by the nose by them, I suppose, and therefore, you know.
And did that happen post awakening, that you wouldn't be identified with thoughts anymore, or what was the difference? Because I'm looking at this like that was quite profound, and you're saying, well, you know, you're not saying too much about how it changed for your life, but you were still young when it happened, and it's quite a remarkable, as you said, event to happen in anyone's life.
Yeah, but you don't need that. You see, that's the danger. Sometimes I don't really say about it, just because I don't like people to think that if something like that doesn't happen to them, they can't live in a way where they're living without the listening to the commentary. So I can't say that. I wish I could say, but I can't say that straight after that, oh, I was enlightened and I lived life. Oh, no. I mean, it just made me more of a seeker, really. And so then I went through everything that everybody goes through. You know, I read, I was into Taoism and different types of Buddhism and Christian Science and all sorts of things, you know. And then, you know, when I read, as probably most people that have watched this have read this at some time, and if not, I kind of hope they have, really. I still think it's one of the greatest books. It's just The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And that made me totally get in touch with that part of me that had happened, you know, that accident. And it sort of, for me, that had an immediate impact, because it sort of was stuck together like glue, that experience from many years ago and what he was talking about, you know. And that simple truth of just, keeping coming back to this present moment and being present is something that is so often overlooked. And I think with Eckhart, who I've been to see him live, but I haven't had the pleasure of meeting. I just think it's so. I think he's an amazing teacher, you see. And I kind of read the book, thought it was amazing, had fantastic things happen, and I'm going back years to when that book came out. And then I sort of came away from it because it was actually so simple, you see, because it's so simple, and that's it. And a lot of people overlook that teaching now because and go into what we call the world of non-duality. Actually, the world of non-duality that I experienced after spending a lot of time with all those Eckhart books and going to see him and everything, drew me away from the experiential into the conceptual. It was like, like in the Bible, it says in the Garden of Eden, like Adam and Eve, they're floating about, really, really happy, living in the present moment. And then this snake comes along, or is it the snake comes with the apple, and says, go and have this tree of knowledge thing. And when I look back, I think that's what happened. I think that when I got into the non-duality stuff, it was like biting the apple of knowledge, because although it's described all the time, nobody can do this, nobody can get that. There's non-dual speak, which you hear everybody use all the time. And it ceases to have the energy of immediate transmission, because it is spoken about in terms that everybody repeats over and over and over. There's like, as I say, that what I used to call non-duality speak. And I'd have people writing to me saying, oh, I can't talk to my partner anymore because everything they talk about is just so trivial, compared to me and my non-dual understanding, and all that kind of thing. And I realized that everybody was going and buying all these non-duality books, as I was, going to see non-duality teachers, as I was. I even ran something called Non-Duality North, where I invited, pretty much most of some of the most famous non-duality teachers who come and stay with me for the weekend, and we put them on and stuff. And people were mistaking the message, and sometimes the transmission wasn't there. The speaking about it was there, but not so much the transmission, not so much that simple feeling of love. I rarely got that feeling of loving expansion that I feel again now when I look back and again watch Eckhart Tolle's videos and things. I mean, I'm not I mention Eckhart because it's so direct and it's so simple, as I say, that people miss it. They almost see him and his teachings as something that, they started with years ago, left it because then they went down the new non-dual approach, the non-dual approach. But as I say, it seems to me that that's where people went off the rails a bit, because it's so much, it's very joyful when we give ourselves permission to just simply not keep describing things, It's just so simple. It's like if somebody came in the room now, well, you and I are together, and said to me, oh, do you know where the string is or something? So I might say, hang on, if you don't mind. Right, now the string. Oh, yeah, it's in the cupboard on the left. You'll have to just get up the steps, blah, 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 and you'll find it there. The first thing that I would say to you is, now, where were we? Because we've chopped that thought chain, haven't we? We've chopped it, and it's harder to get back. So one of the easiest, ways of just coming back to this moment is to just have lots and lots of little pauses. And, when we notice ourselves very engaged in thinking, then we just introduce a pause of just that long, not even a second. And then people try and categorize things like that, like, oh, is that a teaching, or is that a practice? Oh, God forbid. And it's just a sort of a little hint that kind of brings ease. And when we're and then when we're in those pauses, we notice that it's everything's neutral in the pause. It's neutral. I mean, you know this. Everybody that's listening knows this. That the only way that we suffer is because we describe our experience. But all experience is neutral, isn't it? Even if you would say the worst experience or the most awful, so-called awful thing that you could imagine or see on TV, it is actually neutral, isn't it? Unless you describe it. You can't get away from that, can you?
Well, we can't. I mean, there's a lot to unpack in what you've said. I'm just thinking, like, where to start about it. I mean, the major thing with what you said there was after having an awakening maybe of sorts and seeing through the thinking patterns, which happened for me, it was quite sudden and quick and into the search. And then,
I'd like to hear yours. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
well,
I'm sure everybody would love to hear it.
I for some reason, I'm very slow talking about, and I think it's for a lot of the reasons I heard people talk about it. Yeah. You've got me now, Mandi, actually. You put me on the spot.
Well, I just don't believe interviews should be about one person. I like a conversation myself, you know.
Okay, yeah. Well, I had a sudden seeing through of things through tremendous suffering. In a way, life wasn't easy, and it's not easy for lots of us, you know. And so it wasn't easy here too much. But there was, like you said about the thinking patterns, there was a lot of glue to the thinking patterns, and through trying to release from them thinking patterns, a lot more glue applied itself. In other words, the more you suffered, the more I tried to get away from suffering, the more I suffered. So it was a spiral, really. And my life as such collapsed about 2009, 2008, 2009. Every area sort of collapsed. You know, and I was just left with life and wondering what it was about. And I said, I don't care what happens, I'm going to find out what it's about. And literally, if I have to lose myself in the searching, so be it. And I think there was a certain courage in that. There was a certain, not objectivity, not an outside looking. There was a seriousness about, okay, what am I about? What makes me tick? What are the parts of a human being? What is the thought process? Why do we suffer so much? There were a lot of questions I wanted answering. And yeah, I had some sort of, I met a guru and I just sat down, the thinking collapsed, and there was a lot of laughter and things like that. But that was it. But getting back to your talking about you, that was it. But then, like the snake and the apple and the tree of knowledge, it didn't seem like it could be me, and it could be as simple as that. I think low self-esteem really does matter in amongst this somehow. And Tim Freak mentioned it in another podcast. It's about integrating the human being into awakening and things. It's like oil and water. Does it mix? Apparently not. But you know, if somebody does have an awakening, what's wrong with the ego as well? I mean, as far as I could see, I gave up the searching, and it gave me up. I just left the fold, and I went crazy into life, into business, and I just can't stop that. Even if I tried, I just can't stop it at the moment. And part of me wonders how it happened. I left the actual spiritual search. But through a sickness over a few years ago, a very serious illness, I came out of it. And I'm just mad into life now, you know, really into life and all it can offer. And there's a certain exhilaration about everything, a certain test the limits maybe. But it's a total different lifestyle as such. And it's like nothing really did change, but something must have changed that I really can't put a finger on. I just don't know. But it feels a bit like where you are. Why would you leave the teaching? I mean, you've described it as such, but you still are in the spiritual arena with the mysticism and the poetry and things like that. And I'm just wondering why you left that as well.
Oh, I don't think you can ever leave it. I don't think you can leave it. Even if you want to, it doesn't leave you, so you can't really leave it. You only think you can. I think that, you see, when I said that I went off and then went into the world of non-duality and everything, but finally, I went into self-inquiry as well, very, very deeply. And I kind of had 3 months where I just didn't see anybody and just kind of used my house as a cave. And really, this is a lot of years ago. And really, really went into the self-inquiry, which was great, to really find out what you are as that true essence prior to the appearance kind of thing. And so that was, it was immensely useful. And I'm glad that that happened because, it couldn't have done anything else. I mean, the thing that you realize is that everything happens the way it happens and you can't really do anything else about it. That's what I find anyway. And so otherwise, just being happy all the time just because I'm living in the present, it sounds like there was no depth to it. In fact, living in the present is incredible depth, actually, because that's in that nowness, that's where the feeling of love and infinite space is. But that thing about integration, to me, it's not having an opinion about it. It's not divorcing anything from the other, It's not saying that one thing's spiritual and one thing's not. I've got a friend at the moment who is very, very sort of incredible consultant, medical guy, doctor and everything, very high up and everything. And he was that for many years. And then, he's an amazing guy. I can't remember the name of his book, so it's a bit embarrassing at the moment. But he's an amazing guy. Anyway, he sort of saw Jesus and things, and Jesus was telling him, diagnosing people that were coming to him that nobody else could diagnose, and they were getting it wrong, but only this guy got it right. So he gave up his practice and lived doing sort of healings for people and whatnot. But then found that he couldn't afford it, and found that he had to go back to medical practice, and felt this awful sort of split about it. And we were discussing it, and I was saying, well, just drop the idea that one thing's spiritual and one thing isn't, because if you have had that experience anyway, and if you're coming with an open, loving heart, how could we divorce the two? That's being spiritual, isn't it? It's another description anyway, isn't it? The spiritual life, being spiritual. I think being lost in thought, then we don't access our essence. So we could say that we just drop the words of being spiritual, having a spiritual life. It's simply that if we are lost in thoughts so much to the point that we become completely unconscious of our essence, then we are, as it says in the Bible, as a branch cut off from the tree. We are unplugged from our source. So we lose our energy, we lose our happiness and joy. And it's about keeping an eye on things, really, and never, ever getting to the point. I'm not interested in the word enlightenment or anything like that. Awakening, yeah, because we're all awakening, and awakening is an ongoing kind of thing. But enlightenment can suggest that, oh, that's it, I've stopped now, everything's done. I can't be that way, because there is only this present moment, and things are unfolding in this present moment. So to have an opinion like that can be a cause for concern, because We can lose our humility. So we keep an eye on it. And Ramana Maharshi said that too. He said, I can't remember the exact quote. I used to have the quote where he was basically saying that you keep an eye on it, you know. And what you're doing, if what you're doing right now is what you are doing and you feel incapable of doing anything else but what you're doing, then that's absolutely perfect, isn't it? That is you in the perfect place at the perfect time. There can't be anything wrong with it. And how do we know that? Because you're doing it, because it's happening. And that's our proof.
So how do we lead an authentic life as such? It seems that suffering is really something that we could do without, is it? You know, how do we lead a life without suffering and to lead a life of full potential?
I think the suffering is what causes us to seek. So it's very useful, isn't it? Because, I mean, so my life growing up at home was extremely difficult. There weren't a naturally loving family. I think, anyway, I don't want to go into it because it sounds like being a victim, and I'm not a victim. Yeah. It was perfect, but it was extremely sad and difficult and hard. And I was sort of kind of on my own a lot. So that suffering, I'm just so grateful for it, because that's what made me seek, you know. At first it started like a lot of little girls do, looking for sort of wishing stones and fairies in the woods. But for me, that never stopped, you know. I was so wanting to see magic, because I felt that offered a world where there was kindness and sweetness and cherishing and nurturing and love, which is not what I was experiencing. So I'm so glad, you know, that felt so absent, because it really made me look. I mean, it pulled me into all sorts of directions with some very strange people and some very bizarre kind of organisations, you know. But that was just, I'm glad that happened too. You know, it was all par for the course. So suffering is crucial, so that until we can see through the suffering, you know, there's no kind of way to circumnavigate it or shortcut it. And it's just allowing everything to be just as it is. If suffering, it's not about trying to avoid suffering. Suffering comes up for me too, you know, like if I get angry about something, that's not comfortable, but I just allow it to be there and don't add any heat to it. If there's a judgment, then I just don't pay it any attention. I think it's to do with attention. You don't have to pay attention to the suffering. There is, in fact, always a choice. You know, do I want to go down this road? But that's when you wake. That's what we mean by awakening, that you are awake to the fact that there is a choice. Because when you're not awake, then you're not aware there's a choice. You think you are your thoughts, and you get buried in them, and it's horrible. That's the worst suffering.
I think that's one of the biggest things that I discovered, you could say, was, you know, you were fully a person. And I would to say this to a layman, they'd say, look, you should be locked up. You think you're not a person. But I mean, what is the me anyway? You've asked someone, they can't really define it quickly, you know. So believing you're a person is really heavy. And we're taught that, especially someone as old as me, you know, you go back a way, and people are brought up with old religious teachings, and especially here it was quite heavy. Then it's very heavy, Mandi. I'm sure, like you've just said, there's a lot of heaviness about that. But for a teaching, and for somewhere from, like, the Eastern teachings have reached the West now, and so we're discovering, there's more to this. This makes sense. There's a way out of this. Like you mentioned Eckhart Tolle, I started reading Eckhart, and I became obsessed with Eckhart. And I think that's what caused my life to collapse. In some way, it started from there. So, you know, old structures, beliefs I had about money, relationships, they started to collapse. Mm-hmm. And something new was revealing itself. Now we're talking about something I feel now, that freedom, that life without the handbrake on, that fullness of living was always there, wasn't it? And it was obscured by that heavy pattern, yeah?
Yes, definitely, definitely. And you know, then you start to become lighter, and that's when I've got into some things that some people might find strange. You know, because I started to notice that there was light round everything. Like, I mean, of course there is light around everything, but I started to be able to see it, even around toilet rolls, everything, every object. I started to be able to see the light before the object, because every object, it has the appearance and the feeling, if you touch it, of being solid. But if you imagine, let's say you look at a chair and then you can imagine it, but it's true actually, that you can see sort of a lighter version of the chair behind it, and then an even lighter version of the chair behind that, and an even lighter one. And then the same from the front of the chair, you know, and from the back of the chair. You start to get it, that light, when it's really, really sort of condensed, becomes matter. Energy becomes matter. And I'm no scientist, so I'm saying it all wrong, but you know what I mean. And when I'm not engaged in thoughts, you see, that's what I started to notice, that because there was more spaciousness, I was able to, not looking for it, not trying to do it, it just started to come, that I was just aware more and more of the object and the light of the object, the light form before it was the object, at the same time as seeing the object. And then that led me to see something that looked like, well, I suppose I call them halos, and I might freak people out, so I won't go on about it. But there's a page on my website, which is healingbyrevealingsoul.com, called Halo Gazing, because I'd like people to have a go, really, because basically it's just looking above people's heads, and above people's heads there's their magnificent being. It's not the aura, nothing to do with the aura, nothing to do with chakras. It's something that's specifically there. It's their absolute essence, and it's completely beautiful. And so people come to me, and I gaze at them, or they send me a photograph if they can't cut, and I draw these things. I draw them and send them to them. And so the point is that it's just a way of seeing how everybody. It's a way of seeing everybody's perfection. You see, everybody is just so perfect, and why it's so crucial that we need to do everything we can to awaken is because otherwise we don't see it in ourselves, and we don't see it in others. So if we're believing in our thoughts, we're believing in what somebody is presenting to us as them. But for the most part, what's being presented is their thoughts about them. So you've got in front of you somebody who thinks they're too thin, or they're too fat, they're too tall, or they're too short. They don't like themselves because they're not good enough. And they're actually lost in that, and they're presenting that to you, just as you, if you believe those things about you, are presenting that to them. So one of the things, and that's just sort of going to the power poem. So a filmmaker who makes 4-minute videos, specializes in 4-minute videos, came to me and asked, and he said he'd heard about the book, and he said, I'd like to do a film just on the subject of identity, you see. And I thought, oh, crumbs, 4 minutes about identity. Well, if I just said I am, that's not really going to do it. And then the other side of that is trying to describe something that you can't see, could be too long. So I came up with this poem. It was given to me, received, don't ask me by who, it just came through, called What is My Identity If I Am Not My Name? And it was really good because it's... if it's not on the website, I'll put it on there. It's it's really about that breaking down. I mean, one of the lines that's a real mind stopper is that if you say, uh, imagine you've got no memory at all. Well, you can't actually do that, you see. Your mind goes blank. So in this poem, it sort of expresses about the ungraspableness of the identity. Anyway, going back to what you were saying, that's well, no, to what I was saying. This is why I think awakening's so crucial, so that we're not lost in the things that we think about ourselves, because it makes us think those things about other people, and then we create all this separation. I'll stop there in case you want, in case I'm waffling on, going off on one.
No, that's quite fascinating. And the seeing of light, you said that previously in your experience that you had when you were younger, there was like a seeing of light, and it was coming from light. Can you talk about that energy a bit, maybe?
So, well, when it was that accident, that was I could see all the objects, you see, but I could see they were transparent. And I could see that this is how it is that this whole world that appears so real is actually thought up by something that is beyond what we can even name. And if you know, it's the isness of, I mean, yes, some people could call it God, but I don't want to put people off, because we don't need to get all religious on anybody. That's just not, you know, some people don't believe in God. But so I'm talking about the essential isness of everything, creates moment by moment the present picture that we see, just like frames in a film. So on a film projector, there's one frame going after, and it's going so fast that you can't see that when you're watching the movie. You only see a flawless image in real time, you know, as you're seeing this image here. But in fact, it's thousands of images, millions of images going very, very, very fast, creating. And as we have all these little judgments and thoughts, we're moment by moment creating all these little mini realities, you know, that are all the little things that happen to us through the day. And so we don't have to worry so much about karma and reincarnation and all that, because when we're silent, when we live more presently without buying into the thinking, we're not really creating anything at that. So things flow so much more easily. Things just flow, really, and it's about living in that flow. That's really how to do it. And people say to me, yeah, but what do you do when your thoughts racing and racing and racing? Well, when you notice that they're racing and racing, right there, then you're in that space we call awareness. That, because something's aware of all those thoughts going round and round. But I think people get far too worried about everything, you know, worried about kind of, are they being spiritual enough? Are they, you know, are they being kind enough? Are they being good enough? Are they being spacious enough? You know, really, it's about just not trying and not efforting and not minding things so much. You know, it's like when you stop describing, life becomes so much easier. I mean, one day I opened the cupboard, somebody was coming to collect me and I was late. And I just said, oh, you just got to put this thing away in the cupboard. And a whole box of icing sugar. it just exploded out the cupboard. It covered me, covered the floor. And there was wet bits on the floor. Covered the surfaces. There was wet bits on the surfaces because I'd just been wiping everything. And then the dog came in and he was covered in it. And I thought, and this person's getting impatient, outside. But I didn't have any, first of all, I just laughed. And then I didn't have a clue what to do about it. Just nothing, because it was so extreme. It was everywhere. What do you use, So I just stood there, really. And I found that more and more, I'm not describing anything. So there was no, oh, shit. There was no swearing. There was no, it's just what was happening. It's just neutral. I think I came to learn that through all the Eckhart Tolle work, but then it became automatic. And then it became who I was. You see, I just think it's simple. I mean, if you want to live a life that's more stress-free, you've got to put a bit of work in, like anything, like going to the gym. When I first got the power of now, I did everything. That I'd stare at a flower for half an hour. I'd do the work, until eventually it wasn't effortful. I just had an emptier mind through the practice until that became who I was. And it was a very deep thing. It wasn't superficial. It was extremely deep, And so with this icing sugar thing, what happened was, the friend comes, oh my God, I've got no reaction to it. But I just stand there. And then an idea comes. And the idea was, haven't you got one of those little electric things in the shed that I thought, I don't know where it is. And I thought, all right, it says it's in the shed. I'll go to the shed. I found it, and it had about a sort of 1 seconds of charge left in it. It went zzz. But that little charge was just enough to make the tiniest inroad. And it gave me time to think, all right, well, I need a microfiber cloth for this bit, then I'll have a brush for this bit. And then the dog started helping out and licking the floor. And honestly, in 5 minutes, this whole Snow White kitchen was cleared up. And I know that if I'd had a reaction about that, oh God, person's waiting. Oh, what am I going to do? Oh, I can't leave it like this. It'll set like icing everywhere. It would have been a very different experience. So it's little things like that I learned so much from, because it's the little safe things where everything's really fine and something like that is just so trivial, that when it comes to the bigger things, the much bigger things, the more traumatic things, you're able to deal with it because you've been living that way and practicing that way. So I don't care what people say about practice. I think practice is important, unless you suddenly have an enlightened experience and everything falls away. Then that's very rare. It does happen to some people, and it happens sometimes to me, and then I'd go back. But then there was nothing like kind of living more with a little bit of practice, and until even the practice fell away, it just became who I was. But that's the same with any practice, isn't it? You don't need the book anymore, whatever it is, So I don't know what you think about that, John, but that was, that's been my experience.
You've said quite a lot there. I mean, I remember there was a lot of energetic stuff happening for me, actually above my head. I don't go into them too much, but really, oh,
It's like that.
I didn't think there was much happening up there, to be honest.
There's a lot happening. When we talk about this stuff, we bring it right out there. Everybody can feel it at the time. We're talking about it. We're bringing it into the awareness. So, we'll transmit it to each other, listeners. It's not just one person transmitting it. You're transmitting it. I'm transmitting it. Those that are listening are transmitting it. We transmit it to each other.
And it was interesting, that awakening experience I had nearly 10 years ago. I remember she was the guru. She was looking above my head, actually. For she kept looking up here. And that you just made me remember. I don't know why that's relevant, but this woman would have seen a lot of energetic things when she was going through her spiritual thing. Yeah. So I wouldn't, I did have energetic things taking off, but for me, they were just experiences. Even insights were just experiences for me. Well, how about surrender? How would you be about surrender to that power? And that power, when you were describing that power, God, that, whatever it is, like, it's quite, I could feel it arising in me that it's quite undescribable. And for just to apparently know that it will never, ever, ever be known can be astonishing to the person. But why does it mean nothing as such if you're not anchored in the person? It's like there's a neutralness. And then if it's like the person thinks it's wonderful, and then there's a neutralness. There's like it can only be defined if there's a person defining it, and it can't be defined if there's nobody defining it. It's
yeah. I mean, I absolutely love that word surrender. If anybody had to say what's your most favourite word in the whole, English language, it would be surrender. I love that, because that one word, for me, you don't need any other words. That if that one word does it, it's surrender. It's letting go all the time, letting go of your will. Again, it says, thy will be done. And I always think, thy will, not my will, be done. Thy will be done. And it's very humbling. Keeps your feet on the ground. That you're always letting go for a higher power, no matter how trivial the thing, whether it's icing sugar on the floor, or somebody very close to you died, or whatever it is, or you're reading about the suffering of other people, that can feel overwhelming, if you can feel helpless about it. But you're not actually helpless, because you see, I think the thing is that most people, unless they get this bug to seek and everything, they live lives in judgment. They're judging everything. Every part of their experience is judged, and they're judging other people. And so when you live a life where you're judging all the time, there's no room for surrender, because your will is always intervening, isn't it? It's trying to do something about something. But when we just, like, I was watching something recently, and it was about something to animals. Very upsetting. That's my Achilles heel. I just love animals, But just allowing and utterly surrendering to that feeling of grief and sorrow, and feeling it, going right to the point where sitting in it, really, sitting in that feeling, but without adding words to it. Without adding description to it. Then you're not avoiding it. You are facing it head on, and it's courageous. Like you said earlier, it's courageous. You're facing experience head on, but you're not naming it and describing it, which makes the suffering far worse. You're just accepting it deeply. Accepting is a very deep thing, which is misunderstood. Accepting is because some people think, well, if you just accept everything, I just accept it. I just accept it, as if sort of belittling what that really means. I mean, really accepting something is feeling it absolutely, so that if you feel like, my beloved dog Howard died recently. I absolutely adored him.
I
had him
saw
since
that.
he was
Yeah, he was fabulous.
Well, he was fabulous. He was. I had him since he was 5 weeks old. You see, and he was nearly 15 when he died, and he was just my absolute constant companion and best friend, and he was just so full of fun. He was like my co-host. I'd be in the kitchen and he'd be entertaining people. So I recently recorded a music album, and that came to me through this light. That's something else, and that's on my website as well, Choose Only Love album. And Anyway, on the day that I had to go into the studio with the musician, another musician who'd come from hundreds of miles, I couldn't cancel the studio. I had to go into the studio at 4 PM, and I had to. Howard had been so ill, we had to put him down, which is just the worst thing that you have to do. I had to do that at 11 AM and sort of be okay. And how I got through that from 11 till 4 before we went in the studio was facing that the sorrow and the grief head on. So this whole thing isn't. You can't say, oh, I'm all awakened and I don't suffer anymore. It's just, I think the word suffering is the misleading thing. I mean, it was very deeply sad, very sad. And, grief strikes you. So you could say I was grief stricken. So the musician was staying with me. So he stayed in large, only got a small house, and I just went into my bedroom and I said, I just have to be with these feelings, and I'll come out when I'm ready, And I just allowed all the feelings to come up. Absolutely, that's living, that's life, the full belt of the full aliveness of those feelings of sadness, of loss, of grief, but not describing them, just allowing it completely till my whole being shook with it from head to toe, Absolutely. It's a kind of embracing of it. Just deep surrendering to it and acceptance. And I came out of that a few hours later. Well, it didn't take a few hours, but when I was ready to go in the studio, I was absolutely ready. I don't mean there was no more grief, because missing Howard still continues, but there's no suffering with it, you see. The suffering is that extra layer. First of all, there's the experience and our feelings. You know this. And then what we call the suffering is what we feel about what we feel when we call it something. If we don't call it anything, we're feeling the feeling, but without the suffering. And that makes for a deeply happy life, So, yeah, that's why it's kind of it's not as complicated as people think, all this, They don't have to wait till everything falls away. If you just even get some of these ideas, and I do think everybody should read The Power of Now at least once or many times, but that's just what I would say, because I really resonate with that. And it's and all his books, very, very deep. But yeah, it's not describing really is kind of the secret of it, And if describing happens, then that's okay too. But it's just,
There's not much of a story, his story going on, is there? Or her story going on. And it's sort of like, yeah, you feel everything full on, and there's no afterburn, afterthoughts about it. Yeah. And here I can't stop feelings anyway. They arise, and even if they're powerful, they're powerful. If they're not, they're not. But they're all seen, but I'm not ruled by the feelings either. It's quite something, because you feel everything. You're not really ruled by how you feel, but it's like an alchemy of sorts, isn't it? In some way.
Yeah, it is, and there are kind of there are routes to it that are very quick. One route that I found when somebody was really suffering, and it just came to me, and I said, "Well, are you okay?" And she said, "Well, no," and I went. So I said, "Well, are you okay about not being okay?" And she went. First of all, that stopped her mind, and she went, "Well, no, I'm not okay about not being okay." So I said, "All right, but are you okay about not being okay about not being okay?" And then she went, "Oh, maybe." So I said, "Well, are you okay about not sure that you're not feeling okay about not feeling okay about really not feeling okay?" And of course, you get to the point when that person starts laughing, because when you go back far enough, you realize the point of that whole process is that the fundamental essence of your being is neutral, and it's always okay. It's always, but you just have to go back there. So, it's worked for so many people. And I know it's sort of advocating a little practice, but I do suggest it. So I would just say to anybody listening, if you're not feeling okay about something that comes up, it might be something dreadful, it might be something not so dreadful, but if you're calling it dreadful anyway, you're not going to feel okay because you're describing it. But anyway, if you just ask yourself, am I okay about this? No, I'm not okay. And just keep going back. Well, are you okay that you're not okay? No, I'm not okay. Well, are you okay that you're not okay that you're not okay? Until you get to the okay bit, it will always happen. I've never seen it fail. It can't fail, because if you ask enough times, you're gonna get that. So that's just a little practice. But these little practices are a little chink of light, you see. They just show you how something could be, because that little practice makes you end up laughing for the most part, because you can't hold on to suffering actually without all the description about it. So this is it, like that little practice is like somebody's down a deep dark well with all their horrible scary thoughts, and somebody just gives them a rope and they pull onto the rope, and with every okay you get to the point when you're okay and you're out of it, you see. So these things are important to do, I think. To ignore the idea of a little practice is also not very helpful, really.
And I have to ask you, because you come across as a creative person, and obviously you are as such, and you mentioned it probably comes from somewhere else, the creative aspect, but you're into poetry, art, and mysticism about music as well. I'm a creative type as well. Can we talk about the creative aspect and how that comes through and how it integrates or flows through your life? Because I find that interesting. I'm self-indulging here, so.
I think it's so nice. It's lovely to be asked, John, really. Well, what it is that I think it comes from not having I'm very simple-minded, not having a very busy mind, and things just come, and what happens is when they come, I don't ignore them. So what happened was with the music was I was very good friends with a very sort of kind of rather Catholic writer and teacher. Beautiful. I just absolutely love it. It's very mystic work. And he's written 7 books called Choose Only Love, the Choose Only Love series, basically. And they're all different books. And he's called Sebastian Blacksley. And I just loved what he did. And we became good mates. And those books are really affecting me. See, because I love all this stuff. Like there's bits of Catholicism, bits of Buddhism. I embrace everything if it resonates with something. And I had never ever really thought much about Mother Mary, because it wasn't in the realm of my experience growing up, you see, because I wasn't Catholic or anything. But he brings that through, and he would say that although God isn't male or female, it is the time of Mother Mary, and that presence is coming through in the form of a greater tenderness and richness and light. And anyway, you'd have to read his wonderful books. But I was really struck by that, and I just got this feeling that I needed to, I really wanted to do some music based on these books. And so I called, with his permission, I called the album Choose Only Love. And I really felt the presence of, it felt like Mother Mary. I can't stand here and say yes, it definitely was, but it felt like it to me very strongly. And I felt that I should get an Indian harmonium, and that the kind of music that would be evolved from this would be like Indian chants, but with a kind of an Anglo kind of thing, Anglo-Indian fusion. And then these just amazing, beautiful, like almost like canticle kind of songs came through. And so I made an album, and you can hear them. They're all on YouTube, and and the album is on my website, It's the Choose Only Love Music page. And if anybody wants to hear them and you can't find them on YouTube because you don't know the title, you can go to Bandcamp and you can just listen to a sample of each of the tunes. But they just came to me. I mean, and then it was extraordinary what happened when we were recording it, because that was the day that I had to put Howard down. And we had we had 8 days in the studio, but we did everything in 4 days. And it was incredible because each track had, like, there was me singing and then me doing harmonies and then me playing the harmonium and then John playing the guitar, and then there was about 7 or 8 tracks per track, if you see what I mean. And yet we did it in 4 days. And the guys said, never in my life have I done an album that quickly. And I felt the presence of Mother Mary in looking after me, and so many magical things happened when we were recording that. And she told me that whoever listens to this album, it will upgrade their DNA, raise their vibration, and the more they listen, the more this will become part of them. They will integrate these new vibrations through this music. And I'd never heard any music like, I've never heard myself singing like that. So that's on so my website, which I mentioned, which is healingbyrevealingsoul.com. There's a page that's got Choose Only Love Music. And then there's another page of the halo gazing. And then there's other pages about the power poems. That's the music. I just don't want to rabbit on too long.
No, it's music and singing apparently is quite powerful, and I'd often sing to different tunes. I had 2 tunes playing through a tough time in my life that became sort of mantras, and I do believe they actually got me through somehow.
Wow.
Music and I think singing and things like that are quite powerful, I think. Yeah.
Well, they're very powerful, aren't they? Because, I mean, we're made of vibration. So, certain ways that vibrations are put together, which is music, affects us. I mean, our names affect us, I get an awful lot of information about people just from their names. It just comes to me. Somebody gives me a name of somebody I don't know, and so much information comes. And it's because a name is a shape. It's a certain amount of sound. Even if you've got a middle name that's a silent name, it still plays upon your soul, because although you never hear it because you've maybe never told anybody your middle name, you're aware of it. It shapes you. All these things shape us, You
remind me of Nikola Tesla. I actually was reading a bit about him, and he used to see the Fibonacci sequence of numbers in shapes and things, and it used to appear to him in light visions.
Really?
Yeah, so there's a scientific meets the spiritual. I mean, I'm a great fan of his, and yeah, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Nothing can be divorced from anything else, and that's why, there's no need to worry about your spiritual life, or whether you're at a time in your life when you're just engrossed in doing lots and lots of things. The only thing that I would say to people is just, if you are very much involved in lots of mental things, just to keep taking lots and lots of little pauses of just a moment like that through the day, just so that you're snipping these thought chains, you're snipping them. And then you'll find at the end of the day, you're just so much more relaxed. Because if you don't snip these thought chains, you find that your mind's heavy at the end of the day and you can't sleep and there's too much going on. But we just introduce a lot of these little pauses, and, whatever we do, even if we're rushing, we're completely at peace while we're rushing. We can be at peace, when we're at peace, when the core of us is peaceful, everybody feels that off from us, and we've become little pocket peace zones all over the planet, and that has an effect beyond what you could possibly imagine. Because if you are a person that's not judging, the Dalai Lama puts it nicely. He says the absence of judgment is love. And that's true, isn't it? The absence of judgment, what is it? It's love, not the love, the sentimental love. That love isn't an emotion, is it? It's just, it's being, it's pure being, it's the expanse, it's the infinite omnipresence. And one day I remember that there was this new cafe and it was all glass, and basically the windows faced onto the car park. So it was a bit of a self-conscious thing. When everybody came out the car, you were aware that everybody in the cafe was just staring at you because they had nobody else to stare at. And one day I came out my car and I was facing the cafe and I saw all the people and I could see all the judgments in all the faces that people, without meaning to, are just judging. Oh, this person's got blue on, or I like that colour, or I don't like that colour, or this person looks like that. Or it happens so fast, that when you're not aware of your mind and you're not awake at all and you're very unconscious, you just are a mass of judgments. Now, everything we could say is wrong with the world, everything that's happening in the world and all the violence and all the heaviness is from this judgment that comes from unconscious minds that separate everybody. But so this is just to show what a difference it can make, even if you just sat at home, if you did nothing else, but you sat at home and meditated, or you sat at home without meditating, but you just weren't judging. Then the more people that there are that aren't getting into judgments, the more this affects the whole, It affects the whole, just in the same way that when you're with very judging people, you can feel it off them. But when you're amongst people that aren't doing that so much, there's a different kind of feeling. So that feeling goes beyond your four walls. It goes into the world. So we can all be pocket peace zones. And that's a term that only came to me the other day, pocket peace zone. Quite like that, really. And I just thought, well, we can all do that. We don't have to get into groups and be a peace zone. We can do it. We can do little pocket peace zones and get into groups if we want to.
I think they did an experiment where there was groups of people meditating, and exponentially it used to affect more people than they were meditating. So maybe if there was one or two people meditating, it would affect 60 people, and if there was 3 people meditating, it would affect 150 people. And so you would have 100 people could actually their meditation, 100 people meditating together could effectively help 50,000 people. So exponentially it goes on. Yeah. And the judgment thing, even my mind today, I went to get something before the podcast because I was quickly making dinner with my daughter, and my wonderful daughter. And somebody went to the counter ahead of me, and straight away the mind made a judgment on something. And I went, wow, there's like a committee meeting up here about something, and and it's like it was gonna go into, we need to have a board meeting about this person. I was like, no, I'm not going there, And Mandi, is there some sort of, when we get into this path, it seems as if we were talking there about the judgments and stuff, and we get into an area of being a pocket peace person. So it seems as if, because that happened for me, I wasn't getting into the judgment. There was nearly a higher intelligence that said to the mind, no, we're not actually getting into that,
That it's so perfect what you said and what you did. All I would say is that when we have an opinion about our opinions, that's the suffering again, because then what we're doing is we're making a drama of it. Of course we'll have judgments. As long as we are still living in this fleshly body, it's just the way the mind works, because the mind, it just will do that. So it will have a judgment. Oh, doesn't that person look stupid in that hat, or something like that, whatever. Now, let's say, in fact, this happened to me, and this was a little insight for me. So I swim every day, and I was in the swimming in the swimming pool, and somebody got in with one of these old-fashioned swimming caps where they have flowers stuck on them,
Oh,
and the thought was, oh God, that woman looks ridiculous in that. Now, at the time, this is going back years, but I remember this so precisely. I thought, Mandy, first of all, you're a horrible person, Mandy, right? That was the first thing. Two, but she's got a nice smile. Look, she's smiling. She's obviously a really nice person. Oh, I bet she's got a really big heart. Oh, this is how I went, right? Because I felt so awful. And then I realized I was making it bigger and bigger and bigger, and I was making a drama of it, and I was becoming attached to it, like you say, a committee meeting. So that was a great insight for me. And the next time an unpleasant thought, if you like, came, a judgment came about someone else, all I did was drop it immediately. I paid it no attention. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't describe it, oh, you're a mean person. I didn't try to make it better. I just dropped it. And every time, and that is the best way, every time that we find a judgment arising, we don't try and be a good person or be a bad person. We don't make it worse. We don't make it better. We just ignore it. We notice it's just the mind doing its stuff. The mind is only trying to do one thing, in its opinion, keep us safe. So it's judging people from the point of view of who is safe and who isn't. Now, so then you will say, well, then why would you see a woman in a flowery hat not safe? Well, that's when the mind is leaking into our consciousness and we're unconscious about it. It's now leaving the point. I mean, obviously, a lady in a flowery thing isn't going to come over and hit us with a boulder, unlikely, especially in a swimming pool. Nevertheless, it's the habit of the mind to just judge everything. So we are not those thoughts. We don't have to feel bad or good. If we have a lovely thought, if we think, oh, that's a lovely person, I wish them loads of blessings, then we don't think, oh, aren't I lovely? Isn't that? We just drop that. So when at these judgments, we don't pay any mind to them, that's all. And then they don't become attachments or dramas, just exactly as you did. So, yeah.
It's a good slave, but a bad master, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
It's quite powerful. What you're saying, Mandi, is really, really, anyone listening to this, I'm just saying, I do believe that's really powerful stuff to actually hit on that. And it can really free up. You mentioned small little things we can do, but I think that's a huge thing. Here, there's just a belief of if there's unidentification of any thought, it just, what happened for me, there was bondage to thinking patterns because of some sort of ignorance. It was just nobody taught me and it was just automatic. But when there's a disconnect from a thinking pattern, I actually believe that's a miracle of sorts.
Definitely. Yeah, I know what you mean. It is really. It's just that I suppose I do play it down a little bit because it's the habit of the mind to big things up and to cause separation. So it's if I make if we make anything big out of it, everybody's minds goes, that person can do it, but I can't. And we really must dissolve that. We really must dissolve that because there just isn't any difference. We're all built the same, and we people that would watch this are going to be people that are interested in the whole subject of what we've been talking about and other people that you've been interviewing as well. So, we're on safe ground here that we're all wanting the same thing, really, So everybody understands the same thing. And there's nobody's better at it than anybody else. It's just that, you realise things because you're interested. Like I said, from going through, particularly from Taoism. Actually one of the most profound books was, for me, which massively had an effect on me, was The Tao of Winnie the Pooh. That? Did you ever read that book, The Tao of Winnie the Pooh?
I've never had the pleasure of reading The Tao of Winnie the Pooh. I've read Winnie the Pooh probably when I was younger, but no, I haven't.
Okay. This writer, now, what's his name? God, I would hate to get it wrong. I think it's Benjamin something. I used to have loads of these books. I'd give them away. But it's a guy who had the idea of teaching Taoism through Winnie the Pooh, because he said that if you look at the characters in that book, you've got Winnie the Pooh, who was really laid back. I mean, he would be nothing. He would be so happy. One day he's in the woods and he's deciding is with Piglet, who's trying to take a balloon to a party as a present for the owl. Forgotten the name of the owl. Anyway, he's so rushing, because that's the nature of Piglet, that he bursts this balloon and he's crying. So Winnie the Pooh comes and with his jar of honey, because that's what he takes to everybody's party, because that's his favourite thing. And he sees Piglet and he says, "Oh, don't worry, I'll just eat this jar of honey, and then we can play with the pieces of the balloon and put them in the jar and then take them out the jar." So he eats all the honey, and then they make a game of just putting all the bits in the bits of the balloon in the jar and then out the jar and then in the jar. In other words, the whole trail of that book is that Winnie the Pooh just goes with whatever it is, and like water accommodating a stone, just goes with the flow of whatever happens, of whatever arises. And it's portrayed through the different characters. So you've got the donkey Eeyore, he's very miserable. He's like Marvin the robot in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He's very miserable all the time. And then you've got the rabbit, who he calls Busy Back Soon, because he's always running about. And then Piglet likes to show off. That's why he always wants to be first everywhere. And then you've got Winnie the Pooh, who's just really laid back. And it's just a thin little book. And I just would advise everybody to read it, The Tao of Winnie the Pooh. And I found that, honestly, I did find that life-changing. It taught me everything about surrender and going with the flow and everything. And then that made me want to spend my entire life learning how to be like Winnie the Pooh, And so that's kind of what opened everything out, you see. So, sometimes you find a book that just strikes you and it becomes your hero and you aspire to that. And that's great if you've got something to aspire to, because if that becomes your practice and it works for you, it can really open your life out.
There's wisdom everywhere. You remind me, I did this business course because I'm into kind of business stuff. And one guy said, there are no problems, only solutions. Problems are opportunities. And it was like a spiritual something. It was a spiritual bullet. And it was quite interesting. It's like, yeah, wow, okay, yeah. And he was actually right, So we can get wisdom from everywhere, can't we, really? Like,
yeah, absolutely. And like, I don't know if you come across somebody. He's died now in 2000 and something. Great guy, Sydney Banks, and he was a Scottish welder, and he became enlightened. Basically, he was a very, very angry man, and he went to he was doing anything to try and get rid of all this anger, and he went to some psychology conference, and he was just on the beach going home, and he thought, oh, this has been a whole waste of time, a complete waste of time. And anyway, I met one of these psychologists, and he said to this guy, well, I'm just so angry all the time. And the psychologist said, no, you're not angry. You just think you're angry. And that was it for him. He suddenly thought, oh my God. And that's what we've been talking about today, about when we describe things continuously to ourselves, that's what the suffering is. If we keep just having pauses from all the describing, just realizing that you can give yourself permission to just stop describing and listening to the commentary, then you can do it. I just think everybody really could do it. Depends how addicted you are to wanting to suffer and to listening to the stories. I haven't got any addiction to that. I don't want to be suffering, There's
a lot of wisdom, and it seemed to be the talk went a lot in that direction about how how to deal with suffering and the human condition of that. And it's quite profound. Mandi, do you not teach anymore? Because you don't teach, or do you do one-to-ones?
Yeah, I do. I mean, what I do is I do anything anybody asks me. I mean, I just kind of don't set out to. I just see. I mean, I've got there's a page on my website which I don't really like the name, but I didn't know what else to call it at the time. But it's because it sounds a bit up itself, really. It's called spiritual mentoring, but I mean, it's not that I particularly like that expression, but I didn't quite know what else to call it at the time. Anyway, so that's where people can have a one-to-one with me over Zoom, or come and see me or whatever. And yeah, I mean, like if somebody asked me to come and give a talk, then, or not talk, but you know what I mean, something, then I do it. I just don't set out to. It's not that I'm not for or against it. I just see what happens, really. If it evolves, it evolves. I'm always happy to.
That's great to hear. And your website, before we finish, is www. Am I right? healingbyrevealingsoul.com, or is it www.healingbyrevealingmysoul.com?
Oh no, it's got no my in it.
Okay.
It's healingbyrevealingsoul.com.
Okay.
And the reason it's revealing soul is because these things, which you can find out about on the website, and I do workshops about it, these things called power poems, they're about that when it's about doing healing as well, that when we're doing healing, when I'm doing healing for somebody, I'm not trying to make matter better. I'm not seeing them as separate from me with a problem. I just literally sit and I sit in the presence of revealing their soul. So it's like I just kind of wait, not in a waiting consciousness, but I'm sitting and I'm seeing their absolute perfection unfold. It's like how I see these things, these halos above people's heads. So that's why it's called Healing by Revealing Soul.com. And everything that's on that website is revealing soul, because when you are not judging anything, when you are not describing any behavior, you are revealing more of your soul. You're revealing, and that soul isn't yours exactly. So it kind of is and it isn't. So that's why it's healingbyrevealingsoul.com.
Excellent. And there's poetry, art, and music. There's a whole bunch of stuff there that people would be interested in.
The halo gazing.
Halo gazing.
Yeah, if people want to apply to have the halo gazed at, and there a picture of it, or that can be found on the halo page. And there's a video interview that I did all about the halo gazing, which that is quite fascinating. And then there's the whole page with the Choose Only Love music, so they can listen to the music and all sorts of stuff on there.
Mandi Solk, it's been great having you on the show, and it's been wonderful, and I think a lot of people would benefit from that, and I would recommend people to go onto the website there and check it out too.
Oh, can I just say thank you so much, John? First of all, it's just lovely to be in touch again, and I've just really enjoyed it. It's just been lovely, and I loved hearing about you. I'd love to hear more about you as well. So, and thank you, anybody who's cares to listen. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful. It's lovely. It's been fun.
Great stuff, Mandi. It's been fun, and once again, thank you, and we hope to catch up soon.
Okay, thank you. Bye bye.